what were you doing at age 12? Probably not scavenging for bones of extinct dinosaurs so your family could eat dinner tonight.
Well, you know who was? Mary Anning. At the ripe age of 12 years old, those kids are playing sports with their friends or fangirling over the most recent boy bands. But not Mary. Mary was digging for dinosaurs.
Hi there, we're Disha and Eva, and we just graduated from college with degrees in oh my god, I have a degree in genetics, and she has a degree in microbiology, and we're starting a podcast, so we have meaning in our lives.
Yeah, it's post-grad life for you.
Yeah, so basically this podcast is going to be about women in STEM. You've heard of Rosalind Franklin, Marie Curie, people like that, but there's a ton of other women in science whose attributions and discoveries have gone unheard of for a long time. So the whole point of this is to share those discoveries with you, and hopefully you learn a little something.
Wonderful. Okay, well, imagine that you have 9 other siblings. Maybe 8 of them, who really knows? But they all die except for your one older brother. Your family is also incredibly poor, but you like to hunt fossils with your father. Even though you have no education, he helps you learn geology and anatomy. But then he dies. So now you're even poorer, and even though it is frowned upon for a girl, your mother makes you continue laboring for fossils in hopes of earning a few extra pennies.
Theme song! Friendship!
Yay!
Okay. So, Mary's early life was rough. Her father, Richard Anning, was a cabinet maker and a carpenter. I guess this was like the 1700s, but still. Which was somewhat profitable, but he spent more time and was much better at fossil hunting. So he taught his daughter, Mary, how to fossil hunt. Well, one night, Richie, I don't know if there's an appropriate nickname for Richard, was taking a little midnight stroll around in the dark, and then accidentally tumbles down a cliffside. I don't particularly understand how you do that, perhaps because it was dark.
Or, just having a little drinky.
Probably a little drinky, because, I remember when we went camping, and it was pitch black, but, you could still see a cliffside.
You adjust and then you go.
Anyways, maybe a cloudy, moonless night and a little bit of drinky. But regardless, Richard ends up dying from his injuries and tuberculosis. Who even dies of tuberculosis anymore?
Oh, it was like the 1800s, 1700s even.
But he ends up leaving his family 120 pounds in debt. So for context, that is $16,000 in today US money, which is wild. So maybe he had a little gambling or a little drinky problem, but not slay of him.
He really liked his drinkies. Hypothetically, theoretically, we're just assuming. But anyway, so fun fact. When Mary was a baby, some lady was holding her, and then, as the lady was holding her, she got struck by lightning. Mary didn't get struck by lightning, but the girl holding her did. No idea what happened to the lady. We couldn't really find that out. But, Mary's early life, to sum it up, kind of sucked. So Mary starts finding fossils to help support her family in the way that she knows, because at this point, they're really relying mostly on charity to get by. But Mary's real paleontology career kind of kick-started at the age of 12. When her brother found a big old skull in their surrounding lands, basically their backyard, and scientists believe that he found a crocodile skull.
That's just crazy, though, that they just have skulls and fossils and random things in their backyard.
I don't know if Mary thought it was a crocodile or if she really wanted to see where he found it herself, but she went to go kind of poke around the area. So she ended up digging every single day for months. She found a little piece and then found more and kept going. At the end of the day, she uncovered 5.2 meters of a long skeleton out of the ground. But in the end of the day, again, it wasn't a crocodile, but it was the first discovered ichthyosaurus.
So at the time of the ichthyosaurus discovery, people actually believed in creationism. If you don't know what creationism is, it's the idea that organisms do not change over time. They don't evolve, they do not go extinct. And people also believed that the Earth was only a few thousand years old. So this was a hot button topic at the time because her finding actually contradicts the idea that the world is new and things are unchanging. It would promote the idea that, like, oh, everything's not perfect and things that don't exist today did exist and they weren't perfect, so they died out. But the theory of extinction had just been announced by George's Cuvier, who's considered the father of paleontology. So most people know about Charles Darwin, but if you've ever heard of Charles Darwin came up with the idea of natural selection, but his book of evolution and his theory didn't come out for another 48 years after discovery. So people were like, is she for real? She was for real. She for real found an ichthyosaur.
For real.
For real. Ichthyosaur. I thought it was an ichthyosaurus, but it's just an ichthyosaur. Because apparently it's not a dinosaur. So, disclaimer, our intro's kind of wrong, but it sounded cooler than she found a fish lizard.
She only found like one dinosaur. This one is not it.
But ichthyosaur means fish lizard, like the direct translation of it. But it's not a fish, and it's not a lizard. It's an aquatic reptile.
Basically, fish lizard.
Are there reptiles that are? Yeah, there's reptiles that are lizards. But this ichthyosaur is distantly related to lizards and snakes, and they lived during the Mesozoic era, which was from 251 million years ago to 65.5 million years ago. Basically, a long time ago. And they've been found all over the world. When I looked it up, it says it has a porpoise, so like dolphin adjacent like appearance. In my head, it looks like a crocodile and a dolphin had a baby. It was strange looking. Ugh. But yeah.
Well, anyway, moving on to stranger things. Her second big find of her career came about 12 years later. The year was 1823, and she was now 24 years old. Harriet discovered a complete plesiosaurus skeleton. This one is a dinosaur. Plesiosaurus, sorry. But prior to this, only parts of the dinosaur had been found. Imagine being like 2 years older than we are right now and finding two giant skeleton thingies. I can't.
I found a dead body. Not a real dead body. I found a plastic dead body in one of my classes. And then I found parts of a dead body under supervision of my professor.
Is that a dinosaur?
No.
Well, so the plesiosaurus was also an aquatic reptile that lived 215 million years ago to 65 million years ago, and a similar geographic distribution as an ichthyosaur. They look funky. It's giving moray eel, and sea lion had a little baby, and funny enough, they were described as moving similar to sea lions when they almost fly through the water. Alright, so back to our guy, Georges Cuvier, mentioned earlier as the father of paleontology. He basically told everyone that Mary was not credible, he didn't believe her, and there's no way that she discovered a complete plesiosaur skeleton. There's no way. There's a special meeting held in the Geological Society of London to discuss her finds, and she was not invited, and she also wasn't present at all.
Imagine being the talk of the town. She was the tea. Like, she was the tea that everybody was talking about, but she wasn't invited because she was a woman.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they hated her. They were so mad that she found it, and they didn't.
It's like the tea that you talk about that happened in college, but 25 years later you're still beating the dead horse.
Yeah, or it's like when you're scrolling on Instagram and you're like, no way, they're having another kid.
Too many people are having kids right now.
But anyway, so even though Mary was having a growing reputation for uncovering and identifying fossils, many in the science community were hesitant to recognize her work. Probably because she was not a man, but perhaps also because this is the first case that somebody had actually found a complete plesiosaurus skeleton. It's never been done before. She was just too good. So the plesiosaurus was so big and well preserved that Cuvier doubted it until he saw the illustrations in a scientific publication by geologist and / paleontologist William Daniel Conybeare.
Conybeare.
I like
the funny names.
Cuvier authenticated her work, which is when the scientific community began to recognize the value of the discoveries by Mary and her family.
So in 1828, at the age of 29, Mary discovered the first pterosaur, aka the pterodactyl, located outside of Germany. I don't know when she jumped from the British Isles to Germany, but at some point she did. So the pterosaur is a flying reptile, again, not a dinosaur, that lived at the same period as the Mesozoic era. Honestly, again, when we started this, I really thought these were all going to be dinosaurs because that's what the internet said, but they're not dinosaurs.
Again, like, allegedly the pterodactyl is not a dinosaur, but it was on the dinosaur train. So, it's a dinosaur to me.
Right, so these alleged not dinosaurs were the first vertebrates to fly, and instead of feathered wings, they had membranous wings, like bats. And there's apparently a lot of different types of pterosaurs. It's like a family of pterosaurs. But the most notable thing about them is that they're the largest flying creatures ever, which is crazy. She also found a squaloraja skeleton. That sounds like some Indian thing. I know it's not, but Raja means king. But anyways, she found a squaloraja skeleton a year later, a fossil of a fish that was thought to be the evolutionary stage in between from sharks to fish. And it was known as a fish with curling iron eyes, which in our head, our curling irons are either like your super fancy Dyson Airwrap or like they like clip and then like spin. But back then, they had like giant like scissor-like rods, and you would like wrap your hair in between. So I think what they thought were eyes were either bony protrusions or like parts of the jaw, but it looks funky and it's like animal just like sticking out. But in my opinion, it looks like if a fighter jet was a fishy sharky thing, because like it's a triangle, like the shape of it literally looks like a fighter jet, but like it's a fish thing. Anyways, so this also caused an absolute buzz in the Geological Society at the time. Paleontologists did think her find was super cool, but she unfortunately had to sell it because she wasn't allowed into the scientific sphere, being a woman and whatnot. So Mary first found the head of the squaloraja, which ended up being sold to a man by the name of John Nash Sanders. Now, John had the audacity of believing that if Mary found the tail end of the squaloraja, it would automatically belong to him. The absolute audacity. Anyways, so it ended up going to Mary's friend and fellow female paleontologist, Elizabeth Philpott. John even had more of the nerve to request this property from his so-called property from Elizabeth, demanding that she hand it over. She did not. Very slay girl boss move of her.
Yeah, absolutely not. Well, again, at this point, Mary had built a reputation for herself among the upper-level paleontologists, who at the time happened to obviously be mostly men. At this time, she had taught herself anatomy, paleontology, and even scientific illustration to portray her findings and better understand those of others. She occasionally went out on expeditions with other famous, unfortunately, male scientists, such as British geologist and minister William Buckland and paleontologist Richard Owen. They were honestly pretty slave because they supported her.
I do think it's funny though that like he was a minister and also paleontology, because like the whole like creationism thing, because they were like, no, science is not real.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Maybe he just really liked dinosaurs and finding things, so he was like, you know what, I'll deal with it.
Cool guy though.
Yeah. If you could ask anybody a question, it would be him. Anyway, so she even talked with and sold fossils to Cuvier, the guy who once doubted her plesiosaurus discovery. She worked really hard her entire life to find, clean, and prepare fossils she would then sell to make money for her family. Even though she was the one who would discover these fossils, male scientists who bought them often failed to credit her findings, even when writing about her incredible ichthyosaurus. When donating specimens to museums that she had discovered, the person donating the specimen would often receive the credit. I can't say specimen.
Specimen?
Anyway, for the finding. So numerous papers were published without mention of her name. The Geological Society of London also refused to admit her. They refused to admit any and all women until 1904. Few scientists, such as Henry de la Beche, who was a British geologist, and Gideon Mantell, who was a British paleontologist, did credit her in their work. Even with the little credit that she received, she was dedicated to her work. I can't imagine being a woman during this time and the feelings of finding something so incredible, like absolutely world-changing, and then facing the reality that few are going to credit you with the discovery just because what you have in your pants.
That sucks, man. That sucks. So, there was this dude, Thomas Hawking, also a British geologist who is known for his very large collection of ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs. Well, you know who found his collection? Mary. Mary found his collection. But did he give her credit? No.
Why would he do that?
Why would he do that? But one time, Tommy Boy tried to go and excavate an ichthyosaur by himself and hired a crew to go dig with pickaxes. I don't know if you know anything about archaeology or paleontology, but as I mentioned before, I took a couple of classes. Actually, my minor is anthropology, so I've done some archaeology. But when you're looking for samples, you go in with dental tools, like teeny tiny little tools to preserve the sample. Obviously, back in the day, I don't know if they used such small tools, but the idea is you are very delicate, you are very gentle, so you don't destroy samples. But these remains were millions of years old. They can't be dug up with sheer force just picking at the freaking fur.
Right, like you kick it, it's gonna break.
Right. So Mary told him and was like, hey, you better be careful, like things are gonna break, they're dried out, they're brittle. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he didn't listen, did it anyways, and when he tried to dig up the sample, it crumbled, and it sucks that the specimen was lost, but bro kind of got what he deserved for being overconfident.
Yeah. I bet what happened was that he, like, told all his buddies, like, yeah, these are my ichthyosaurs, like, look at them, I found them myself, and then his buddies were like, hey, look, there's an ichthyosaur skeleton presumed over here, do you want to go dig it out for us, or dig it out with us? And he was like, yeah, totally, and then he panicked.
Probably.
He panicked and was like, pickaxe.
Give me Minecraft.
We've been playing Minecraft for, like, the last 3 days. Anyway, near the end of her life, the British Association of the Advancement of Science and the Geological Society of London, man, what a title, gave Mary a few annuities, which is basically like an annual monetary award in recognition of her contribution to science. I can't imagine that would be a whole lot, but then again, couldn't really find that. But so shortly after she died in 1847 from breast cancer at the age of 47.
Did they know what breast cancer was back in
I don't
that
know,
time?
But I guess because it was like reported.
Interesting.
But I don't know. Well, again, after her death, the president of the Geology Society mentioned her in his annual address, even though they still continued to not admit women until 1904. So, she died, and then we'll mention her because I guess she's passed, and then they still don't admit women, so I don't really know what good this did her at all, or much little to other women, because it took so long still to get them admitted. In 2010, 167 years after her death, a full century and a half, and then some more, she was named one of the top 10 most important women scientists in British history by the Royal Society.
I hope her ghost is like haunting the paleontologists. So if you currently look up an online exhibition of Mary Anning on the Geological Society of London's website, it describes her as a fossil collector and dealer, not a paleontologist. That makes me so angry.
It's 2025, and they still can't even be like, alright, yeah, she was a paleontologist, she found things.
But when looking through their exhibition, the Geological Society has mentions that there is a so-called popular narrative that male scientists took her discoveries and exploited her, but she was well regarded within her circle of geological friends, and male scientist friends did a lot to help her later in her life. I'm not so sure about that. I'm rather skeptical, in fact. It sounds a lot like the Geological Society is trying to cover their butts for being so mean to her while she was alive. But recently, Anning's discovery has been renamed the Ichthyosaurus annengae. I really don't know how to pronounce that. But the whole point was to to honor Mary Anning. So at least that's a little something for her. It's nice and it's hopeful that women like her are gaining some recognition that they very honestly truly deserve, but it's really, really sad, and it sucks that they never got to see this recognition in their own lifetimes. So I hope we taught you a little bit about Mary Anning and her magnificent not dinosaurs.
She's one dinosaur.
Yeah.
But yeah, she found a lot of super sick things, and she deserves to be a little more well known.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to our first episode of our podcast series. I don't know who we're talking about next week, but tune in and listen. If you want references and notes, we will post them all probably somewhere.
Yeah, probably in our description or something. All right.
Bye! We did it!
What if it's not recording?
Oh my god.